The Silent Orchestra of Kindness. In a small, forgotten town where the mist clings to the cobblestones like a heavy, cold velvet blanket, there stood an old house at the very end of a winding street. High above, in a tiny attic where a single golden lamp flickered against the frost, lived a girl named Alara. Alara saw the world through the lens of a profound silence. Since an accident when she was only 10, her ears no longer caught the morning bird's song or the crisp, rhythmic rustle of autumn leaves dancing in the wind. The world was a silent film to her, but as her surroundings grew quiet, her heart grew a different kind of hearing. She didn't hear sounds. She heard the quiet vibrations of human souls. She felt the heavy frequency of pain and the soft, fragile hum of hope. That particular winter was harsher than anyone could remember. The wind howled through the narrow alleys, biting through layers of wool, and thick snow buried the rooftops, seemingly freezing the very smiles on the faces of those rushing by. People moved with their heads down, lost in their own struggles, eyes locked on the icy ground, afraid to look at one another. Not far from Alara's home, in a shadowed corner of the town square, an old man sat on a wooden crate with a weathered, scarred violin. His fingers, stiff and blue from the biting cold, moved across the strings with a desperate, shaky grace. He played, but almost no one stopped. His music, which Alara felt as gentle, rhythmic shivers against her attic window pane, carried a sorrow so deep it felt ancient. It was the sound of a man who had become invisible to the world. A man whose stories had no one left to tell them to. Alara watched him every night from her window. She saw his breath bloom like white smoke in the frozen air. She saw the way his shoulders slumped when the last passerby disappeared into the fog. She realized that he wasn't just cold from the weather. He was freezing from the lack of human warmth. One Tuesday evening, when the thermometer dipped lower than ever, Alara decided to step out into the storm. She wrapped herself in her coat, but her focus was on two things she carried: a thermos of hot ginger tea and a long, thick scarf of brilliant red, knitted by her own hands over many lonely nights. As she approached the corner, the music stopped. The old man looked up, his eyes clouded and startled, fearing perhaps that he was being told to move on. Alara said nothing. She couldn't. Instead, she stepped into his space and slowly, gently, draped the warm red wool over his shivering shoulders. Then, she poured a cup of tea, the steam rising like a quiet prayer between them. She saw his hands tremble as he took the cup. For a long moment, they just stood there in the absolute silence of the falling snow. No words were spoken, but the air felt different. Alara pulled out a small notebook from her pocket and wrote a single sentence. "I cannot hear your music with my ears, but I can see its light warming my soul. Thank you for not letting the silence win." A single tear escaped the man's eye, tracing a slow path down his wrinkled, weathered cheek. He didn't say a word, but he didn't have to. In that silent exchange, the frost around his heart began to melt. Kindness is a curious thing. It is like a small stone tossed into a perfectly still lake, creating ripples that expand far, far beyond the point of impact. The old man played differently after that night. His violin no longer mourned. It sang of resilience. It sang of being seen. A young man, burdened by the crushing weight of unemployment and debt, happened to pass by. He was at his breaking point, his spirit nearly broken, but the newfound strength in the violin's melody made him pause. Near the musician's feet, he found a small scrap of paper, one of Alara's notes, that had been caught in the wind. "Do not give up. One door closes only so you may find the courage to walk through a palace elsewhere." Instead of surrendering to his shadows, that young man felt a spark of dignity return. He used his very last coins to buy a simple loaf of bread, and seeing a shivering child huddled in a doorway, he sat down and shared half of it. The child, moved by the stranger's unexpected grace, later found a single wildflower clinging to life between the frozen stones. He picked it and ran to give it to a lonely woman sitting on a park bench, who hadn't spoken to a soul in weeks. And so, a silent orchestra of kindness began to play throughout the town, warming hearts that had long ago turned to ice. It started with a girl in an attic and a scarf, and it ended by changing the rhythm of 1,000 lives. People often wondered about Alara. Why did she give so much when her own life seemed so limited? Why bother with a world that offered her no sound? If you asked her, she would only smile and sign with her hands. Happiness isn't found in what we take from this world. It is found in what we give, even if it is just a smile, a scarf, or a moment of truly being present. Choosing kindness, choosing to be happy, is not just an act of charity. It is the act of building a sanctuary within your own soul. Because kindness is the only music in this universe that requires no ears to be heard and no voice to be understood. Look around you today. The world is cold, but you have the fire. The world is waiting for your melody. Are you ready to play?